Have you ever spoken English and felt like something was off? Like you were saying the right words, but your speech still sounded unnatural? Maybe too stiff, too robotic, or even a little boring?
Well, you're not alone. Many English learners struggle with this. They learn grammar, vocabulary, and even pronunciation, but when it comes to real conversations, it still doesn't sound quite right.
But don't worry, today we're here to fix that. In this episode, we're going to show you how to make your English sound natural, fluent, and effortless, just like a native speaker.
Welcome to English Learning Podcast, where we help you master English through real conversations. I'm Sophia.
And I'm Adam. And today, we're diving into one of the most important topics for English learners: how to speak English naturally and avoid robotic speech.
In this episode, we're breaking it down into 10 powerful chapters, each packed with practical tips, fun exercises, and real-life examples to help you sound more like a native speaker.
By the end of this episode, you'll learn how to add natural rhythm and intonation to your speech, why you should stop overpronouncing every word, the secret of contractions and connected speech, and much, much more.
Trust me, if you've ever felt like your English sounds unnatural, this episode is going to change the way you speak forever.
So grab your headphones, get comfortable, and let's jump right into Chapter 1. Why does English sometimes sound robotic? All right, let's talk about something that almost every English learner struggles with: sounding natural in conversations. You might have perfect grammar, a great vocabulary, and even good pronunciation, but somehow your English still feels off. It feels stiff, robotic, maybe even unnatural. And if you've ever felt that way, trust me, you are not alone. This happens to so many English learners, and today we're going to fix it. So, why does this happen? What makes some learners sound like fluent speakers while others sound like they're reading from a textbook? Well, there are 3 major reasons. First, monotone speech. This means speaking without variation in pitch or emotion. Imagine if I said this entire sentence in a completely flat voice. Hello, how are you? I am fine, thank you. That sounds lifeless, right? That's because English, like music, has a rhythm. Some words are emphasized, some are stretched, and some are softer. Without that variation, your speech sounds robotic. Second, unnatural pauses. Many learners pause in the wrong places because they're thinking about grammar while speaking. For example, let's say you want to say, I went to the store and bought some apples. But because you're still forming the sentence in your head, it comes out like this: I went to the store, and bought some apples. See how unnatural that sounds? In English, we don't pause randomly. We pause at natural breakpoints, called thought groups. And the third reason? Over-formality. Many learners were taught English from textbooks, so they speak like a formal letter instead of a real person. For example, if you meet a friend and say, "Good evening, how do you do?" That's grammatically correct. But in real life, people just say, "Hey, how's it going?" Over-formality makes your English sound outdated, stiff, and, well, robotic. But don't worry. Sophia and I are going to show you exactly how to fix these issues today.
Absolutely, Adam. And I want to emphasize something important. This is not the learner's fault. English courses focus so much on rules, grammar, and correctness that they often forget one of the most important parts of communication: how it sounds in real life. Think about how you learned your first language. Did you memorize long grammar rules before you spoke? No. You learned by listening, by imitating, by feeling the rhythm of natural speech. But when people learn English, they do the opposite. They focus on memorizing perfect sentences, and then when they speak, they sound stiff, like they're reading from a textbook instead of having a real conversation. And let's talk about intonation. This is where a lot of learners go wrong. Intonation means how your voice rises and falls when you speak. English isn't spoken in a flat tone. It's full of emotion, and how you say something is just as important as the words themselves. Let's take a simple word like really. If I say it in a flat tone, really, it sounds boring. But if I say it with rising intonation, really? Now I sound surprised. Or if I lower my voice and stretch it out, really? Now I sound suspicious. Same word, but different emotions based on how I say it. Another big mistake? Thinking in your native language. This is one of the biggest reasons for unnatural speech. If you think in your native language and then translate into English, your sentence structure and word choices will sound unnatural. Plus, this habit slows you down because your brain is doing double the work. That's why some learners hesitate while speaking because they're translating mid-sentence. But here's the secret. Fluent speakers think in English. They don't focus on individual words, they focus on phrases and chunks of language. Instead of translating, "I am going to the store to buy milk" word by word, fluent speakers automatically think of it as one unit. I'm going to go to the store to get some milk. And this brings me to one of my favorite points, connected speech. Many learners sound robotic because they pronounce each word separately instead of connecting them. For example, in a textbook, you'll see, "What do you want to do?" But in real life, native speakers say, "What do you want to do?" It flows together. The problem is, learners aren't taught this natural flow in school. They're taught to pronounce every word perfectly, which makes them sound overly careful and not natural. So, here's the good news. You can train yourself to sound more natural, and we're going to show you exactly how. In the next chapter, we'll start with one of the most powerful techniques, mastering rhythm and intonation. This is the key to making your English flow smoothly, just like a native speaker. Stay with us, because this is where the transformation begins.
That's right, Sophia. And here's something I want our listeners to really take in. This is not about perfect English. This is about real, natural, confident English. Think about it. When native speakers talk, they don't worry about every single grammar rule. They focus on communicating. That's why even if your grammar isn't perfect, if your rhythm and pronunciation sound natural, people will understand you easily. So, here's a quick exercise before we move to the next chapter. Think about how you introduce yourself in English. Do you say, "Hello, my name is Adam. I am from the United States. It is nice to meet you"? If so, it's technically correct, but it sounds robotic. Instead, try saying, "Hey, I'm Adam. I'm from the US. Nice to meet ya." See the difference? One sounds like a textbook, the other sounds real. This is just the beginning. Up next, we're diving into intonation and rhythm, the game changers that will take your English from robotic to fluent. Don't go anywhere, because this is where you'll start to sound like a natural English speaker.
And trust me, once you understand rhythm and intonation, your whole perspective on English will change. You'll start noticing how native speakers really talk, and you'll be able to copy those patterns in your own speech. So if you're tired of sounding stiff, robotic, or overly formal, stay with us. Because by the end of this episode, you'll know exactly how to speak English in a way that feels real, confident, and effortless.
All right, so now that we understand why English can sometimes sound robotic, let's get into one of the most important elements of natural speech, rhythm and intonation. If you've ever felt like your English sounds flat or emotionless, it's probably because you're not using intonation correctly. But don't worry, this is something you can train yourself to master. First, let's define what intonation actually is. Intonation is the way our voice rises and falls when we speak. It's the melody of the language. Every language has its own unique intonation pattern. For example, in some languages, a sentence might sound flat, and even from start to finish. But in English, we use a mix of rising, falling, and neutral intonations depending on the meaning and emotion of the sentence. So, why does intonation matter? Because it changes the entire meaning of what you say. Let's take a simple word. Really? If I say it with rising intonation, really, I sound surprised, like I just heard something shocking. But if I say it with falling intonation, really, it sounds serious, like I'm confirming a fact. And if I stretch it out and say it with a flat tone, really, I sound sarcastic, like I don't believe what someone is saying. Same word, 3 different meanings. That's the power of intonation. If you don't use it correctly, you might sound uninterested, bored, or even rude, even if you don't mean to. But when you master intonation, your English instantly sounds more engaging, expressive, and, most importantly, natural.
Exactly, Adam. And I love the way you described English as having a melody, because that's really the best way to think about it. English is like music. You need to know when to go up, down, stretch a word, or pause. If you say everything in the same tone, it's like playing music without any variation. It just sounds boring. But if you add natural rises and falls, your speech comes to life. Let's break this down further. In English, we mainly use 3 types of intonation patterns. 1 rising intonation, up arrow. Your voice goes up at the end of the sentence. We use this in yes/no questions or when we're unsure. Example, are you coming? Your voice rises at the end. If you don't raise your voice here, it won't sound like a question, it will sound like a statement. 2 falling intonation, down arrow. Your voice drops at the end of the sentence. We use this for statements and commands. Example, I live in New York. Your voice drops naturally at the end. This makes you sound confident and certain. 3 neutral flat intonation. Your voice stays level with no rise or fall. We use this for unfinished thoughts or when we're unsure. Example, I was thinking, maybe we could go out. The first part is neutral, then it rises at the end. And here's where learners struggle. Most English learners don't use these patterns naturally. They either use too much flat intonation, which makes them sound robotic, or they don't emphasize the right words. That's why native speakers sound so dynamic, because they instinctively use intonation to add meaning and emotion to their words. Let's practice. If you're listening right now, say this out loud. Are you serious? Now make your voice go up at the end. Now try, I'm serious. This time, let your voice fall naturally. Feel the difference? That small change in pitch makes your speech more natural and helps your listener understand what you really mean.
That's such an important point, Sophia. And once you start noticing intonation in everyday speech, you'll never hear English the same way again. In fact, here's something fun you can do. Watch a movie or TV show and pay attention to the way actors use their voice. Notice how their tone changes with emotion, sarcasm, excitement, or frustration. That's how real English is spoken. And let's not forget about rhythm. If intonation is the melody of English, then rhythm is the beat. Think about how a native speaker says something like, "What are you doing?" They don't say it like a robot, "What are you doing?" Instead, it flows together. "What are you doing?" This happens because English naturally connects words together, a concept called connected speech. Native speakers don't pause after every word, they blend them together in a way that sounds smooth and effortless. And if you want to sound natural, you have to train your ear to hear these connections and practice saying them yourself. So here's a challenge for our listeners. For the next 2 days, every time you watch a YouTube video, a movie, or a podcast in English, listen closely to the way people speak. Try to copy their rhythm, their intonation, and their connected speech. Don't just focus on what they say, focus on how they say it. This small shift in attention will completely change the way you learn English.
That's such a great challenge, Adam. Because at the end of the day, language is not just about words. It's about sound. The more you listen and repeat natural speech patterns, the more your brain will start automatically picking them up. And let's make this even more fun. If you're listening right now, let's do a quick shadowing exercise. Shadowing means repeating after a native speaker immediately, without pausing. So I'm going to say a sentence, and I want you to repeat after me with the same rhythm and intonation. Ready? I can't believe it. Say it with rising excitement. Now try. I can't believe it. Say it in a flat, unexcited tone. See how the feeling completely changes depending on the way you say it. That's why intonation is so powerful.
All right, Now that we've covered intonation and rhythm, let's talk about another huge mistake that makes English sound robotic: overpronouncing every word. This is something I hear all the time from English learners. They say each word too clearly, too separately, and too perfectly, which actually makes their speech sound unnatural. I know. You've probably been taught to speak clearly in English classes, right? And yes, clarity is important. But native speakers don't pronounce every word perfectly. We blend words together. This is called connected speech, and it's one of the biggest secrets to sounding fluent. Let's look at an example. Imagine you're asking someone, "What do you want to do?" Now, if you say it exactly like that, word by word, it sounds slow and unnatural. But how do native speakers say it? We blend the words so it sounds more like, "What do you want to do?" Did you hear the difference? Let's break it down. What do you becomes "what do you want to" becomes "wanna." So instead of "what do you want to do," a native speaker naturally says, "What do you want to do?" in a quick, smooth flow. That's how real spoken English sounds.
Yes, and this is one of the biggest reasons English learners struggle with listening. They learn English from books and classrooms, where teachers pronounce everything slowly and clearly. But in real conversations, native speakers don't talk like that. We connect words, shorten sounds, and speak faster. Let's try another example. Imagine you're saying, "I am going to meet my friends later." If you pronounce every word separately, it sounds too slow. I am going to meet my friends later. But if you say it naturally, it becomes, "I'm going to meet my friends later." Here's what's happening. I am contracts to I'm going to changes to gonna. So instead of "I am going to the store," a native speaker would say "I'm gonna the store." See the difference? This is the key to sounding fluent and natural. But many learners force themselves to pronounce every word clearly because they think that's correct. In reality, it just makes their speech sound robotic. And here's another reason connected speech is important. It makes speaking faster and easier. Think about it. Would you rather say, "What do you want to do?" with 6 separate words, or just "What do you want to do?" in one smooth phrase? Blending words reduces effort and makes your speech flow naturally.
Exactly. And let's practice some real-life sentences to help our listeners master this. If you're listening right now, I want you to repeat after me. But remember, don't pronounce every word separately. Try to blend them together like a native speaker. 1. Did you eat yet? Do you eat yet? 2. I don't know. I don't know. 3. Let me help you. Let me help you. 4. Give me a minute. Give me a minute. 5. I've got to go. I've got to go. Do you hear the difference? When you connect words, your English becomes smoother, faster, and more natural. And this isn't just slang or casual speech. This is how English is spoken every single day in real conversations. Even in professional settings, people don't pronounce every word separately. They connect words to keep the flow of speech natural.
That's so true, Adam. And if you want to take this to the next level, start listening carefully to native speakers. Watch movies, listen to podcasts, and pay attention to how words are blended together. Here's a fun exercise. Pick a short dialogue from a movie or TV show. Play it once and write down what you hear. Then look at the subtitles. Notice how many words were blended together. Try saying it the same way they do, using connected speech. This will help you train your ear and improve your speaking at the same time. And let's be clear, this doesn't mean you should be lazy with pronunciation. It just means you should learn how real English is spoken. Native speakers don't pronounce every word perfectly, so if you want to sound like a native speaker, you shouldn't either.
That's a great point, Sophia. A lot of learners worry that if they use connected speech, their English will sound sloppy or wrong. But trust me, it's the exact opposite. The more you connect words, the more natural and fluent you sound. So, let's give our listeners a fluency challenge. For the next 24 hours, every time you speak English, try using connected speech. If you usually say, what do you want to do? Try saying, what do you want to do? If you usually say, I have got to go now, try saying, I've got to go now. It might feel strange at first, but the more you practice, the more natural it will feel. And I promise, once you master this, people will start telling you, wow, your English sounds so fluent.
Yes, this is one of the fastest ways to instantly improve your spoken English. If you want to sound confident, fluent, and natural, this is what you need to practice.
All right, so we've talked about intonation, rhythm, and connected speech, all of which help you sound more natural. But here's something just as important: expressing emotions in your speech. Think about this. Have you ever spoken in English and felt like people weren't really engaged in what you were saying? Like you were saying the right words, but something was missing? Well, I'll tell you what's missing: emotion. Without emotions, your words are just words. But with emotions, they become powerful conversations. They grab attention, make your speech more interesting, and help people connect with you. Let's take a simple sentence. That's amazing. Now, if I say it with excitement, my voice goes up and my face lights up. That's amazing. Big smile, energy in my voice. But if I say it sarcastically, my voice goes flat and I raise one eyebrow. That's amazing. Slow, unenthusiastic tone. Same words, two completely different meanings. That's the power of expression. If you don't use it, your speech will sound flat and lifeless. But when you add emotion, your words come alive.
Exactly, Adam. And I want everyone listening to really think about this. When you speak in your native language, do you speak with emotion? Of course you do. You raise your voice when you're excited. You lower it when you're serious. You add pauses for suspense. And you speed up when you're telling an exciting story. But when many learners speak English, they lose all of that. They focus so much on being grammatically correct that they forget to sound human. So, let's break it down. There are 3 key ways to sound more expressive in English. 1. Vary your pitch and tone. Don't speak in a flat voice. 2. Use pauses for effect. Don't rush every sentence. 3. Emphasize key words. Make important words stand out. Let's start with the first one. Pitch and tone. Your pitch is how high or low your voice goes. If your pitch stays the same the entire time, you'll sound like a robot. But if you let your voice rise and fall naturally, your speech will sound dynamic and interesting. For example, listen to these 2 ways of saying the same sentence. Flat voice. I can't believe it, that's incredible. Boring and robotic. Expressive voice. I can't believe it, that's incredible. Energy, excitement, variation. Do you hear the difference? Emotion makes your words come alive.
That's such a great point, Sophia. And another trick to making your speech more expressive is pausing at the right moments. Think about great speakers, whether it's actors, public speakers, or even YouTubers. They don't rush through their sentences. They pause to create suspense, to make their words sink in, and to keep their audience engaged. Here's an example. Without pausing, Robotic. So yesterday I met this guy, and he said something really interesting, but I didn't know how to respond, so I just smiled and walked away. With natural pauses. So yesterday, I met this guy, and he said something really interesting, but I didn't know how to respond, so I just smiled and walked away. See how the second version feels like a real story? The pauses make it more natural, more dramatic, and more engaging. This is how native speakers talk.
Exactly. And let's talk about the third way to sound more expressive, emphasizing key words. Native speakers don't stress every word equally. They emphasize the most important words in a sentence to highlight meaning. Let's try an example. Say this sentence with me. I never said she stole my money. Now let's stress different words and see how the meaning changes. 1. I never said she stole my money. Someone else said it. 2. I never said she stole my money. I absolutely didn't say that. 3. I never said she stole my money. Maybe I implied it, but I didn't say it. 4. I never said she stole my money. Maybe someone else stole it. 5. I never said she stole my money. Maybe she borrowed it but didn't steal it. Same sentence but different meanings based on which word is emphasized. This is why stressing key words is so important. It makes your message clear and expressive.
That's such a cool example, Sophia. And it shows exactly why speaking English isn't just about words. It's about how you say them. If you want to sound more fluent, more engaging, and more natural, you need to vary your pitch. Don't speak in a flat voice. Pause strategically. Let your words breathe. Emphasize important words. Highlight meaning. And here's a fun practice exercise for our listeners. 1. Pick any short sentence. For example, "That's unbelievable." 2. Say it 4 different ways: excited, sarcastic, angry, confused. 3. Record yourself and listen back. Do you sound expressive? If not, try again. This is the secret to making your English sound natural and engaging.
Yes. And here's one final challenge for our listeners. For the next 24 hours, every time you speak English, focus on adding emotion. Whether you're ordering food, practicing with a friend, or just talking to yourself, don't just say the words, feel them. Because when you speak with emotion, confidence, and expression, people don't just hear your words, they feel them. And that's when you truly sound fluent.
All right. Now that we've covered intonation, rhythm, and expression, let's talk about something that's a game changer for sounding fluent: contractions and connected speech. Now, if you've ever listened to native speakers and thought, "Wow, they speak so fast. How can I ever understand them?" I have news for you. It's not that they're speaking too fast, it's that they're using contractions and connecting words together. This makes their speech flow smoothly and naturally. Let's look at some basic contractions first. Instead of saying, "I am happy," which sounds too formal, a native speaker would say, "I'm happy." Instead of, "You are going to love this," a native speaker says, "You're gonna love this." See the difference? Contractions remove unnecessary sounds and make speech more fluid. But many English learners don't use them because they were taught to pronounce every word fully and perfectly. And the result? Their speech sounds too stiff, too formal, and not natural. And that's where connected speech comes in, when we don't just contract single words, but blend whole phrases together. Instead of saying, "What do you want to do?" word by word, a native speaker would say, "What do you want to do?" And instead of, "I have got to go now," a native speaker would say, "I've got to go now." Contractions and connected speech are the secret to making English sound smooth, easy, and natural.
Exactly, Adam. And I want to emphasize this. If you never use contractions, your English will sound too formal and stiff. Think about it. Do native speakers really say, "I cannot believe that you are going to the store because you are hungry"? No, that sounds way too careful and robotic. Instead, they say, "I can't believe you're gonna the store because you're hungry." It's faster, more natural, and easier to say. But many English learners don't realize this because they were taught to pronounce every single word separately. And that's not how real English is spoken. Let's break down some of the most common contractions and reductions so our listeners can start using them right away. I am, I'm, you are, you're, they are, there, he is, he's, she will, she'll, we would, we'd, did not, didn't, cannot, can't. Now, let's go even deeper. Connected speech. Native speakers don't just shorten individual words. They connect words together to make speaking faster and smoother. For example, going to, gonna, I'm gonna call you later. Want to, wanna, do you want to go out? Have to, hafta, I have to leave soon. Let me, let me help you with that. Give me, gimme, give me a second. Kind of, kinda, I'm kinda tired. Because, 'cause, I'm late 'cause of traffic. See how native speakers simplify their speech. This is what makes English sound natural and conversational.
Yes! And I want our listeners to practice this right now. So if you're listening, let's do a quick contraction drill. I'm going to say a full sentence, and then Sophia will say it in natural, connected speech. 1. I am going to call you later. 2. He is not at home right now. 3. Do you want to watch a movie? 4. I have to go to work early tomorrow. 5. Let me know if you need help. Now, let's hear the natural versions.
All right, listen carefully and repeat after me. 1. I'm going to call you later. 2. He's not home right now. 3. Do you want to watch a movie? 4. I have to go to work early tomorrow. 5. Let me know if you need help. Did you hear the difference? If you're practicing at home, say it again and again until it feels natural. Because the more you practice speaking like this, the more fluent you'll sound. And here's a fun challenge. For the next 24 hours, try to use contractions and connected speech in every English sentence you say. Instead of going to, say gonna. Instead of want to, say wanna. Instead of let me, say lemme. I promise, if you do this, people will instantly notice that your English sounds more natural.
And this is such an important skill because this is how English is actually spoken. When you use contractions and connected speech, you don't just sound fluent, you also sound more confident and relaxed. So, here's another quick exercise for our listeners: shadowing practice. Listen to native speakers in movies, YouTube videos, or podcasts. Whenever you hear a contraction, pause the audio and repeat it exactly as they said it. This will help you train your ear and improve your speaking at the same time. And trust me, once you start speaking like this, you'll never go back to overpronouncing every word again.
Yes, because once you realize how fast, smooth, and effortless native speech sounds, you'll want to use contractions and connected speech all the time.
All right, now that we've covered connected speech and contractions, let's move on to something that makes your English sound even more natural and engaging: thought groups. Now, if you're wondering, what are thought groups? Let me explain. When native speakers talk, they don't say entire sentences in one long breath. Instead, they break them into smaller chunks to create natural rhythm and clarity. These chunks are called thought groups. For example, instead of saying this sentence like a robot, I live in New York and I work as a teacher. One long breath, no pauses. A native speaker would naturally say it like this: I live in New York and I work as a teacher. Pausing between ideas. See the difference? The pause creates a natural flow and makes the sentence easier to understand. This is exactly how native speakers talk.
Yes. And the great thing about thought groups is that they make your speech sound clearer, more engaging, and more confident. Here's a quick way to understand it. Think about a comma or a period in writing. When we write, we don't put all our ideas in one long sentence without punctuation. That would be confusing, right? Well, the same thing happens in speaking. If you don't break your sentence into thought groups, it sounds too fast, too crowded, and hard to follow. But when you add natural pauses, your speech becomes much easier to listen to. Let's take another example. Instead of saying this all at once, I was walking down the street and I saw my friend, and we went to a coffee shop and we talked for hours. One long sentence, no thought groups. A native speaker would say, I was walking down the street and I saw my friend, and we went to a coffee shop, and we talked for hours. Each pause makes the sentence easier to follow. It also gives you time to think and breathe. So, if you've ever felt like you run out of breath when speaking English, it's probably because you're not using thought groups.
That's such an important point, Sophia. And thought groups aren't just about clarity. They also make your speech more engaging and expressive. Think about great storytellers. When they speak, they pause at the right moments to create suspense, excitement, or emphasis. They don't just throw all their words out at once. They let each idea breathe. Let's take a simple sentence and see how pausing in different places can change the effect. 1. I can't believe what happened. Fast, no pauses, neutral tone. 2. I can't believe what happened. More dramatic, builds suspense. 3. I can't believe what happened. Adds surprise and excitement. See how the pauses change the way the sentence feels? This is exactly what happens in real conversations.
Absolutely. And here's the best part. Thought groups actually make speaking easier. Many learners struggle with speaking fluently because they try to say long sentences all at once. But that's hard. Even native speakers don't do that. So here's what you should do instead. Break your sentence into small, natural chunks. Let's practice with some real-life examples. If you're listening, repeat after me. 1. Yesterday, I went to the mall and I bought a new jacket. 2. This morning, I had a coffee and then I went to work. 3. I'm really excited because tomorrow we're going on vacation. Feel the difference? Instead of struggling to say the whole sentence at once, you're speaking in natural, easy chunks just like native speakers.
Yes! And if you're wondering how to know where to pause, here's a simple trick. Pause where there's a natural break in meaning. Pause before important words to add emphasis. Pause when you feel like you need to take a breath. Here's a great way to test if you're using thought groups correctly. Record yourself speaking. 1. Pick any sentence. 2. Say it without pausing. Listen back. 3. Now say it again with natural pauses. Listen back again. Which one sounds more natural? I promise, you'll instantly notice a huge difference.
That's a fantastic tip, Adam. And here's a fun fluency challenge for our listeners. For the next 24 hours, every time you speak English, try to break your sentences into thought groups. Pause naturally before important words. Record yourself and compare your speech with native speakers. If you do this, you'll notice that your speech becomes smoother, clearer, and more confident. And best of all, you'll sound more like a native speaker.
All right, so we've talked about how to use thought groups to sound more natural. But have you ever noticed how native speakers don't always speak in perfect, complete sentences? Sometimes they pause, sometimes they hesitate, and sometimes they fill the silence with words like, like, and well. Now, you might be thinking, wait, aren't filler words bad? Aren't we supposed to avoid them? Well, not exactly. When used correctly, filler words can actually make your English sound more natural and conversational. But if you overuse them, they can make you sound unconfident or unclear. So today, we're going to talk about why native speakers use filler words, how to use them naturally, without sounding unprofessional, when to avoid them. Because believe it or not, adding just the right amount of like, and can actually make your speech more natural and engaging.
Exactly, Adam. And I know some learners are probably thinking, wait, why would I want to use filler words? I thought fluent speakers don't need them. But here's the truth. Native speakers use filler words all the time. Let's look at a real-life example. Imagine someone asks you, what do you think about the movie? If you answer in perfect textbook English, you might say, I think the movie was very good. The acting was excellent and the story was interesting. That's fine, but it sounds too formal and unnatural. Now, let's add a few natural fillers the way a native speaker might. I think the movie was, really good. The acting was, amazing. And the story was, super interesting. See the difference? The second version sounds more real, more relaxed, and more natural. That's because nobody speaks in perfect sentences all the time.
That's such an important point, Sophia. And here's why filler words actually help in a conversation. 1. They give you time to think. If you're searching for the right word, adding a short or well can buy you a second without making the conversation awkward. They make you sound more natural. Native speakers don't speak in robotic sentences. Using a little like or makes your speech flow more casually. They show personality and confidence. Believe it or not, a well-placed can make your conversation feel more engaging and relaxed. But, and this is important, you have to use them in moderation. If you say, I think the movie was, really good, that's too much. If you use too many filler words, people might think you're nervous or unsure about what you're saying. So, let's talk about how to use filler words the right way.
Yes. And this is where a lot of learners make mistakes. Some never use fillers at all, which makes them sound too formal. Others use too many, which makes them sound hesitant. The key is balance. So, let's go through some of the most common filler words and how to use them properly. Used when you need a second to think. Example. So, I think we should leave soon. Like, used for emphasis or when explaining something. Example. It was like the best day of my life. You know, used to check if someone understands. Example, she was so upset, you know. Well, used to introduce a thought. Example, well, I'm not sure if that's a good idea. I mean, used to clarify what you mean. Example, I mean, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't great either. So, used to continue a conversation. Example, so, what do you want to do later? And here's a secret, even professional speakers use filler words. If you watch interviews with actors, politicians, or business leaders, you'll hear small fillers in their speech. The difference? They use them strategically, not after every single word.
That's such a great list, Sophia. And let's do a quick practice exercise for our listeners, so they can get used to using filler words naturally. If you're listening, repeat after me, but this time, add the filler words naturally. 1. Without fillers. I think the test was difficult. With fillers. I think the test was like kinda difficult. 2. Without fillers. She didn't like the food. With fillers. Well, she didn't really, like the food. 3. Without fillers. We should leave now. Check mark. With fillers. So, I think we should, leave now. See how fillers make the sentence flow more naturally? If you practice this, you'll sound more fluent and conversational in no time. And here's a challenge for our listeners. Record yourself speaking in English for 1 minute and see if you naturally use any filler words. If you don't, try adding some lightly to make your speech flow better.
Yes! And one last thing, when should you avoid filler words? In professional or formal situations. If you're giving a presentation at work saying, I want to talk about, our sales numbers, will make you sound unprepared. Instead, practice speaking clearly and confidently when they become a habit. If you use like or in every sentence, it's time to slow down and be more aware of how you speak. When you're writing, filler words are great for speaking, but in writing, they often make sentences weaker. Instead of I think this book is, really interesting, just write, this book is really interesting. So remember, use fillers in moderation, use them naturally, and use them to enhance, not weaken your speech.
Wow. We've covered so much in this episode. And if you've made it this far, congratulations. You're on your way to speaking English naturally, confidently, and fluently. Today, we learned how to avoid robotic speech, and sound more like a native speaker. Use intonation, rhythm, and connected speech to make your conversations flow. Practice real conversations instead of stiff, textbook English. Use shadowing, one of the best techniques to improve fluency fast.
And remember, fluency isn't about perfection, it's about consistency. The more you practice these techniques, the more natural your English will sound. And if you want to take it a step further, here's your challenge for today. Pick one of the techniques from this episode, whether it's shadowing, using contractions, or speaking with thought groups, and practice it for the next 24 hours. Trust me, if you apply even one of these tips, your English will instantly sound smoother and more natural.
And hey, we'd love to hear from you. Which tip from today's episode helped you the most? Drop a comment below and let us know. And if you found this episode helpful, don't forget to like this video. It really helps us reach more English learners like you. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We release new episodes to help you improve your English every week. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Thank you.